concert. We're giving away tickets to the Outlaw Music Festival, Jack White, Guns N' Roses, Chris Stapleton, and plenty more. Enter today at KFAN.com. Keyword contest.
It's July 20th, 2026, Tenna Fitzgerald. It's a tradition unlike any other. We talk fantasy football before anyone else is talk fantasy football, and when we want to talk fantasy football, we have to talk with basically the godfather of fantasy football. That would be Paul Charch in live from Utah. How's it going out there in mountain time, Paul?
It's going great. I miss you guys. I miss talking fantasy football, but it's kind of season now, right? We do this every year where you and I talk just a little bit too early just to get the juices flowing a little bit. Talking fantasy again. It's the best.
It is. What do you got going on with fantasy these days? I know you had some stuff going on last year. I'm sure you always have something on the horizon. Is there anything you can tell us about yet?
Not right now.
Oh,
I know.
I'm eager for my Paul Charch. I need to have my Paul Charchian fantasy content.
I appreciate that. I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
I wish I could say more. I can't, but
got it.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. Optimistic.
Great. As I mentioned before the break, if you want to ask Charch any questions, you can text us at the KFAN Bradshaw and Bryant text line, 64686. You can also send us talkbacks on the iHeartRadio app, or you can email us booth@kfan.com. This time of year, Charch, everyone always wants to know who's the number one pick in the draft. I think there's a lot of years where the number one pick's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
This year, there's probably multiple different picks that you'd have confidence in to take a number one. Who would you take at number one overall right now?
I'd take Jahmyr Gibbs because this year Gibbs has insane upside, and I'm the opposite guy. You know that, right? So, usually my feeling is when in doubt, go with more reliable positions than running back. Even great running backs, can get hurt a lot more often, and all the other things that we've always talked about. Do the opposite. But Gibbs' upside is just freaky right here. David Montgomery's gone from the Lions, and they replaced him by the plotting and totally ineffective Isaiah Pacheco, who's could be just a total non-factor in this offense. So there's a scenario here where Gibbs could lead the league in rushing attempts, running back receptions, rushing touchdowns, rushing yards, receiving touchdowns by running backs. I mean, I'm very specifically not saying he's going to be LaDainian Tomlinson in 2006, but this is the sort of like lightning in a bottle opportunity that he's got, surrounded by a great offense where he becomes the do everything running back with David Montgomery gone. he's got that kind of like just insane, the 2,000-yard upside, the over 20 touchdown upside that Jahmyr Gibbs has, that I just don't think anybody else can touch that upside. And he could just be a league winner for you, Jahmyr Gibbs. So to me, even with all of my do the opposite predilections, Brandon, I think he should be the first player taken.
All right, before we get to the other options, I wasn't expecting to talk about Isaiah Pacheco at 204, but now we're going to do it. I think Isaiah's a little fascinating for me, Charch, and I think he has a wide range of outcomes here, right? In one case, he could potentially be taking over a David Montgomery role in which you could score double-digit touchdowns, and here's a guy you can get late in your drafts, or he could also get cut before training camp even ends. Like, yes. I feel like there's like a wide range of outcomes here on Isaiah Pacheco, but if it goes the right way, you get quite the bargain for him from where he's being drafted.
Well, okay, you could, and an ideal scenario, the upside for Isaiah Pacheco is designated touchdown guy. That's it. He can't catch. He is a totally normal NFL runner at best. The Chiefs desperately needed him to be just like good. Isaiah Pacheco didn't even need to be great. They just needed like something, signs of life from him, and they got almost nothing from him, and then just ultimately let him walk this offseason. I don't think he's going to be a factor in this offense. At best, he would be a bye week plug-in where you keep your fingers crossed for a goal line touchdown, and I don't think he brings more to the table than that, and he would need Jahmyr Gibbs to get hurt, I think, to get any kind of really meaningful opportunities in that Lions offense. Jahmyr Gibbs is just so much better. I can't see the Lions playing a lot of games here and giving Pacheco a lot of touches. All
right, so you're going Gibbs number one overall. What percent of fantasy leagues do you think Gibbs will go number one overall? Because you still have some other great options, right? I mean, Bijan Robinson's been pretty rock solid. Jamar Chase can take over any year. Puka Nacua. Jackson Smith and Jigba's coming off an unbelievable season. I mean, even a Christian McCaffrey, you never know, could be the best player in fantasy football, right? Like, there's a lot of other options. How do you kind of rank those, and how many of those leagues do you think Gibbs will go number one?
Well, I think Gibbs is going to go the data says he's going number one in over half of leagues. You could make a case for all the guys that you mentioned, but Bijan Robinson is by average draft position going number two on average. And part of it is because now he's kind of got that backfield to himself. They brought in Brian Robinson. So beware, there's two B Robinsons playing running back in Atlanta. Do not draft the wrong B Robinson.
Also, yes. I just did the Scott Fish draft recently, and I didn't fall for the B Robinson thing, obviously, because Bijan was taken pretty early. But I wanted Jamison Williams of the Detroit Lions because it just had the first initial in their last name. It did not have their first name written down, so it just said J. Williams. I landed on Javonte Williams.
Oh.
Instead of, not that there's a big difference in those two, but still, I just felt ashamed. I got the wrong guy.
Yeah, that's that happens. It's probably not your fault. Tyler Algier gone. I mean, that's part of the big story on Bijan Robinson is that Tyler Algier is in Arizona now. He'll be behind Jeremiah Love. And that guy was a nuisance for Bijan. It kept Bijan was still great, but it took touchdowns away and some really valuable runs away from Robinson. And the hope now is that it's really going to be a lot of Bijan Robinson, and it probably will be. So he's going number two. And then I think the only other guy that I would consider is Jamar Chase. I just, who's ever been unhappy that they drafted Jamar Chase? He's awesome. You finally get Joe Burrow healthy. I wish the offensive line, I wish for once they just invest in their offensive line and solve that problem. But, nevertheless, Chase is, he remains obvious.
Their defense is usually bad enough where they're throwing a ton.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
And you have the elite quarterback when healthy, obviously. How about riskiest first round pick? Who are you a little leery of in that first round?
End of the first round, Miami running back Devon Achane. Achane is, he gives you the upside. He's the best player in the Dolphins offense, but that's not saying anything. That's a terrible offense. Maybe going to be the lowest scoring offense in the league, potentially, depending on if Malik Willis is any good. Dolphins offensive line remains a pretty big question mark, but he catches a ton of passes. 78 passes 2 years ago. Achane, 67 receptions the last 67 and 78 the last 2 years. And they're going to be trailing a lot. They'll be throwing to him a lot. And the receivers are just garbage. Jalen Tolbert and Tutu Atwell and Malik Washington. That is the thinnest set of receivers in the league. And so there's no scenario where Devon Achane isn't a big part of the offense, but the downside is huge too. Some teams are just going to play to stop him, because if you stop him, that's probably it for the Miami offense. He's bad at the stripe. He's carried the ball inside the 5 24 times in his career. He's only scored 7 times. Offensive line, as I mentioned, super inconsistent. So, there's a lot of upside and downside in the first round. I just think he's going to have too many bad games. He's going to have some 0 games where he just gets taken out of the offense. And I worry about the price that you have to pay for somebody that can't necessarily win you 3 games in December.
Well, because there's nothing else around there, right? They have wide receivers that people have never heard of. The volume should not be an issue with him. It's just going to be efficiency.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yes, that's exactly right. He'll touch the ball a lot in most games, although there are going to be scenarios. The Miami defense is going to be just awful. They're going to get roasted a lot. There will be times where they'll just be down by 17 early, and he won't be a factor.
All right. What is your preferred draft position this year?
I'm going in the middle of the first round, Tenna. I like if you can give me my choice, right? If I'm picking out of pick 5, that gives me Puka Nacua, or if I'm 5 through 8, Puka Nacua, Jonathan Taylor, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I feel like I can't go wrong.
Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb. I can't go Christian McCaffrey. I can't go wrong with any of those guys. And so I feel like there's a great opportunity to go there, come back earlier in the second round, where I might have Justin Jefferson waiting for me in the second round. Chase Brown is who I've been targeting, middle of the second round. So I think I like that spot because I'm still getting really high upside players in the first round. And I love the guys that I can target in the middle of the second round as well, like Chase Brown in my case. James Cook might be available for you. I mentioned Justin Jefferson right there. Kenneth Walker is the new lead back for the Chiefs. So you can get a really good player in the middle of the second round as well.
And a lot of those guys are mentioning, right? Like Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith and Jigba, even Christian McCaffrey. Like they could be league winners for you. You wouldn't be surprised if they're a league winner.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys could end up being league winners. Absolutely true.
Yep. All right, let's go to break. I do want to talk some tight ends with you next. We'll talk rookies as we move along. And like I said, we'll get to our texts and talkbacks from all of our fan listeners. Talking fantasy football with Paul Charchian. We're going to be doing it until 3 o'clock today right here on The Fitz.
If the boats are...
All right, welcome back. Tenna Fitzgerald along with Max Fuller and Paul Charchian talking fantasy football live from Utah. Charch, I know you're a big fan of tight ends. Yes. Let me know, where do you think the elite, because there's a couple elite tight ends this year in McBride and Bowers and maybe a couple on young ones that might be on the horizon eventually here. Where do you see those guys going, and what is your tight end strategy this year?
It's different this year, really different this year. Most years I've been advocating just go get one of the handful of really good, reliable tight ends. And, that way you don't have to play the game of being short suited at one position. You don't have to worry about trading for a tight end later. I've generally been a fan of it, but not this year. Let's talk about the position a little bit. First, tight ends are going late, really late. Brock Bowers is going number 1 overall by average draft position. End of the second round, a few picks ahead of Trey McBride, which I think is a little overcoaching. Trey McBride's awesome, and so is Brock Bowers, but I think a lot of people are just assuming Bowers is going to be better with presumably better quarterbacking one way or another in Las Vegas, but still, McBride's been great. So you can get those guys end of the second round, beginning of the third round for Trey McBride. And then it drops to Colson Loveland, end of the fourth round. And even after that, despite coming off an ACL, Tucker Kraft's going off the board at tight end 5, 6th round. And so the reason I'm saying let's not take any of those guys, there's so many good tight ends. Brandon, this year, I'm ready to go to war with like 14 different tight ends.
Wow.
And there's not 14 teams in most leagues. There's just so many good guys. For example, all the guys you just mentioned, Harold Fannin, Kyle Pitts, Sam Laporta is one of my favorite sleepers. He gains Drew Petzing, our old friend at offensive coordinator. Remember, Petzing turned Trey McBride into a monster in Arizona. And now Sam Laporta is going to play in that offense. So I'm excited about what Sam Laporta could do. If you want George Kittle, because he's coming off that injury from last year, you can now get him round 8. And then with the last pick of your draft, take Jake Tongas in case George Kittle's not ready to go for week 1. Dalton Kincaid should be ready to emerge this year. Jake Ferguson gets pelted with targets. Isaiah Likely could be a magnet for receptions in New York with John Harbaugh, his old coach, right? And that's a depleted receiver room. And then there's like the veterans that you always know are good. Dallas Goedert and Mark Andrews and Hunter Henry. I mean, you got so many
Travis
options
Kelce
in the position. I'm waiting on tight end this year. And I just feel like I have too many good guys that I can go get in like round 8, round 9, round 10.
What's the quarterback strategy? It seemed like for a couple of years you had to get one of these running quarterbacks that they can give you elite production. It almost seems like that's leveled out a little bit over the last year or two. Where are quarterbacks now going in this year's drafts?
Yeah, they're also very suppressed this year. Josh Allen, first quarterback off the board, which shouldn't surprise anybody, but he's not going till the 3rd round. And he's going behind guys like Chris Olave, who's already had 5 or 6 diagnosed concussions. Rashee Rice, with all the question marks surrounding him and potential, looming suspensions. He has got it. And people just aren't moving at this position. And then after Josh Allen, as I mentioned, Josh Allen's 3rd round, no other quarterbacks going until round 5. That's Lamar Jackson. And then after Jackson, it's a round later, and it's Drake May. I mean, Drake May's quarterback 30 is going at pick 60 overall. So no, people are not taking quarterbacks this year. So you can wait and get an elite one if you want. You wait a while. Round 5, you can get Lamar Jackson if you want. Or you can just slough that position and go get the 10th best quarterback. Like I got Justin Herbert as quarterback 10. I'm ready to go to war with Justin Herbert. No problem.
Yeah.
That's round 10 for Justin Herbert.
Well, even like a Matthew Stafford in round 11. I mean,
yeah, right. So you've got you got a lot of options at the position this year. And, one of the things I've done in a few of my drafts, I've been waiting on quarterback, and then I'm taking Jackson Dart in round 12 as my dart throw, just in case it turns out that he is going to keep running like he has and does not get hurt. Then, potentially you could have somebody that could just fill the box, score, ground, and air. And that interests me. Malik Willis would be somebody else like that, where you get somebody who can run the ball like crazy and just try a dart throw, and that guy's your second quarterback late in the draft.
I will say from a fantasy standpoint, this might be the year I'm getting like a Jalen Hurts on my team, because it seems like his value has gone down quite a bit. And I know he had a little bit, he had a down year last year. I get it.
Yep.
As long as the tush push is legal, like Jalen Hurts can win a fantasy football. He can be your number 1 fantasy football quarterback by the end of the year. And right now, you're looking at, 5-6 quarterbacks ahead of him.
Yeah. He's quarterback 6, Jalen Hurts. And, the tush push is still a thing. Now it's gotten worse. I mean, it's not as successful as it used to be. So there's, that part worries me a little bit. The overhauled receiver room for Philadelphia is pretty fascinating because we've seen AJ Brown leave. That's highly notable. But they've worked so hard to get that receiver room back with competent players. Devonta Smith is fascinating. He takes over as wide receiver 1 because Mekhi Lemon, who they took in the 1st round, probably is not going to be a huge factor day 1. I think he'll be very good, but maybe not day 1. And Devonta Smith, who's always sort of been, not a little bit of an afterthought in that offense, he might be a regular producer now. They traded for Dontavian Wicks. He's there as well. Hollywood Brown for whenever, the 4 games he's healthy with. You'd like to think that Jalen Hurts has got enough good targets that he can be super capable as a passer and then help you out on the ground to no small effect. They're still going to do the tush push. It's just not like the 90% success rate that it used to be. I think last year's success rate was was down to like 68%, 70%. And that's a bit of a change.
I know people playing fantasy football, they always want to know about the rookies, right? You want to find the next hotshot rookie that's going to come in and maybe give you a splash year one. Charch, I play in a bunch of dynasty leagues, so I'm pretty well caught up on a lot of these rookies, and this appears to have been a bad rookie draft. Obviously, Jeremiah Love's the big one, running back out of Arizona, though. You might technically have some competition there and not great quarterback play. Other than Love, and I'm assuming you like Love at least a little bit. Your thoughts on Love, and then even just kind of the rest of the rookie class of anyone that you think could make an immediate impact.
Yeah, this is a pretty bad rookie draft. Last year wasn't great either. Everybody's telling me next year is going to be phenomenal. Jeremiah Love is the obvious best player in a rookie from a rookie draft standpoint, and he's going off the board in the second round in a lot of leagues. So, you're going to have to pay for him in a regular league as well. If you're in a dynasty league, he's the obvious first choice, and it's not close. Even if you're in Superflex, and Fernando Mendoza would be the other obvious selection, I think I would still take Jeremiah Love. And it's just, but the rest of the draft is just not great. Like, look at the running back position. Brandon, Seattle drafted running back Jadarian Price, and he'll open the season as the starter for Seattle.
Yeah.
But then Zach Charbonnet comes back in October, and now you're looking at a blended backfield. And a lot of the reasons why Kenneth Walker was a middling fantasy producer until Zach Charbonnet got hurt at the end of the season, and then he went berserk. That'll probably happen there. Other running backs, like Denver running back Jonah Coleman, has got to contend with J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. Kansas City brought in Emmett Johnson, but he's one of us. Kenneth Walker. So it's just there's not a lot. The quarterback position's a wreck. Receivers, there are good receivers in this draft, but a bunch of them have got just terrible quarterbacks, at least in the short term. I love Omar Cooper, and I think he's going to be a great NFL player, well, at least very good. But he's got Geno Smith throwing to him this year. The Browns, they drafted KC Concepcion and Denzel Boston, but they've got either a disinterested Deshaun Watson at quarterback or the highly risky Shedeur Sanders throwing to them. So they have big question marks. Carnell Tate should be good with Tennessee. He's got Cam Ward.
Question mark.
And by the way, sad Trombonski. If you're wondering where he was in the league, he's still around. He's in Tennessee.
Is he? I did not know that.
Yeah. So maybe Cam Ward gets better in year 2. He should get better. And then Carnell Tate could maybe be better. But, and then there's Jordan Tyson, lottery pick on a functional Saints offense. Tyler Shuck looked pretty good for stretches last year. Maybe he's going to be good. Oh, receivers better. It's just we didn't have one of these scenarios where other than Lemon, most of the good receivers landed into spots with pretty big question marks on the offense and at the quarterback position.
I was going to ask you about the tight ends. You got Kenyon Sadiq drafted in the first round of the New York Jets, which seems like it's a place where fantasy athletes go to die. And yes. Eli Stowers, obviously in year 1, might have a little competition there with Dallas Goedert, but might be able to take over eventually. Your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, the only one that's even being drafted in redraft leagues is Kenyon Sadiq. Everybody else is outside of draftable range at the tight end position. You mentioned Eli Stowers for Philadelphia, but he's behind Dallas Goedert, and he's probably going to stay there this year unless, Goddard gets hurt. So, the next guy off the board by average draft position is Oscar Delp, who, by the way, plays for the Saints. And if you didn't know that, don't feel bad. He's going off the board at position 450. There's again, to illustrate that the rookie class just doesn't feel tantalizing right now. And it doesn't feel like there's a bunch of great players.
All right. I got a bunch of listener questions I want to get to you next segment. I also want to touch on some Vikings related fantasy questions, because I think there's a lot of questions about this Vikings offense to go over. We'll do that one longer segment with Paul Charchian next on the 10 Fitzgerald.
Coming out, 10 p.m. You're listening to Brandon Molest.
Mention on the comment program, we have a new sponsor Mondays and Fridays in the 2:00 hour. It's brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company. You can visit them online at yourhomeimprovementco.com. KFAN.com. Max with me, talking a little fantasy football with Paul Charchian, live from the lovely, beautiful Utah. Charch, let's talk a little Minnesota Vikings fantasy here quick before we get to a bunch of texts. Pretty interesting, right? You had a bunch of players on the Vikings last year, which their offensive production went down. A lot of it tied to your quarterback. Might have a new quarterback, though they have not made that official yet. It is a quarterback that when he has been on the field has had, I think, some fantasy success in the past, but he's not on the field a whole lot. How do you view? Let's stick with Kyler Murray first, specifically with him. If he is the starter, how do you view him from a fantasy perspective, and how does he affect the rest of the offensive players?
Well, first, I think Murray is the starter, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close here. But for the sake of JJ McCarthy, I hope I'm wrong, but I feel pretty confident Murray's going to is going to win this thing with ease if it is even a competition. Which, and again, I'm not convinced it is. Murray traditionally, up until last year, had really locked in right around quarterback 8 through 12 in fantasy points in a typical season. And because he runs the ball some, which helps, but he's not built to be a goal line guy. So he's not getting tush push easy touchdowns, almost never got runs inside the 5-yard line. He's not that kind of guy, but he chips in these 30, 40, 50 rushing yards a game, and that stuff adds up. And so that has helped him be a good fantasy contributor. Now he's going to have to board a quarterback 20 right now. There's actually less confidence in Kyler Murray by the fantasy community now than in Arizona, which seems weird to me. I see a lot of value in Murray, particularly if he's going off the board at quarterback 20, there's a great chance I can get him as my second quarterback. And if you believe like I do that he's going to win this job with ease, then I think that's a tremendous value for Murray. And all you have to do to help the rest of the Vikings and stay as the number one quarterback is just be non-awful. And I think Kyler Murray can do that.
How about his number one wide receiver then? Justin Jefferson, down year last year, just 84 catches, just 1,048 yards, only 2 touchdowns, which, those catches and yards might be good for other players, but that's a really bad year for Justin Jefferson. Can he recover and become one of those, number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in fantasy, or with the question marks at quarterback, are we still going to be struggling here?
I think, he obviously it's going to be better. I know it goes without saying, right? And, the thing that people are freaked out about is the 2 touchdowns from last year. But if you're a 1,000-yard receiver, you're almost always going to get more than 2 touchdowns. He's going to have to get far better quarterbacking to get back to the days where we were talking about Justin Jefferson as the first player taken. But right now, going off the board at pick 13, it's pretty good value. I think that's about right for Jefferson. And, where the disconnect in the fantasy community is, if you think Justin Jefferson is pick 13, why is Kyler Murray going off the board as quarterback 20? If you have enough confidence in Kyler Murray to make Justin Jefferson back at the end of your first round or beginning of the second round, then you'd think Murray would go a little bit higher here. So I like Jefferson where he's being taken. To me, at beginning of the second round feels about right for somebody as good as he is. I've heard this a couple of times, which I want to have an uncomfortable conversation about it. If things go really badly for Minnesota, Jefferson works his way out of town and is playing for some better offense in the second half of the season.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't even want to say that into existence, but I know that thinking is out there.
All right, so I know I'm going to be putting you on the spot here a little bit, so I understand if you won't be able to answer this question, but you've always been to do the opposite guy.
Yeah.
You mentioned, hey, you might be able to get like a Puka Nacua or a Jackson Smith and Jigbo in the middle of the first round. Let's say you're in the middle of the first round, right? You get one of those two. You get Justin Jefferson on the way back. What is kind of your ideal looking, do the opposite starting lineup if you're kind of in that middle of the first round?
Yeah, so Jackson Smith and Jigba or Amon-Ra St. Brown would be like middle of that first round.
Okay.
Right? And then coming back into the middle of the second round, again, I told you I'm targeting Chase Brown a lot, but just strictly do the opposite here where we're going to let that running back position go. We're going to pound that position later. Then you're looking at Drake London or Brock Bowers or the guy that I've been targeting in the second round most of my drafts, Nico Collins.
Yeah.
Nico Collins is he is by far the best player on that Houston offense. That whole offense really does go back through him. And other than the moments when he was hurt the last couple of seasons with some games missed, just uber reliable, locked in as a wide receiver one. Love him in that spot. And then third round, if you want to make your move on Josh Allen, you can get the best fantasy quarterback, the most reliable fantasy quarterback if you'd like. If you want to roll the upside of Malik Neighbors, who's by far the best pass catcher on the Giants, and that offense should be better this year. Zay Flowers going in here. T. Higgins going in here. You want to go on the upside of Emeka Egbuka as the new number one in Tampa, you can go there. So you've got all of these ways that you can attack these other positions, and then leave that running back position and then go hit middle round running backs that you think can make a difference, like Cam Scatabo or Bucky Irving or Travion Henderson. David Montgomery, I love, back to Houston again.
Yeah.
You know, Montgomery is going to get all the goal line work. I think he's the best running back on the team. Woody Marks is just going to turn into a rotational third down guy. Montgomery's looking at a big workload on a competent offense, and that's another possibility. Quinshon Judkins doesn't catch, but he could be 1,500 rushing yards. Quinshon Judkins is a great do the opposite target here as well.
All right, let's go through some text messages and the Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line 64686. One of the texters says, am I the only person that thinks Kenneth Walker is now quite overvalued in Kansas City? How do you view Kenneth Walker? Always been, when healthy, a solid fantasy running back, never super explosive. Kansas City has always kind of had the reputation with Reed of being a great spot for running backs to go, but they haven't really produced a lot there in recent years. So how do you value Kenneth Walker?
All right, it's a great talking point because Kenneth Walker is a top by talent to me. He is a top 5 or 6 running back in the NFL.
Wow.
You saw it in the Super Bowl. You saw it in the playoff run. When Kenneth Walker is the go-to player, go-to runner on his team, he's great and totally reliable. And this is obviously he goes to Kansas City, a very good team it's going to give him a lot of opportunity. Now, what Andy Reid has not done a lot of has been running the ball at the stripe. He's done it some, but hasn't had a guy like Kenneth Walker in a long time. You have to go back quite a ways, a number of years now to find the kind of running back that Kenneth Walker is on the Chiefs with Andy Reid. You're back to Kareem. And when Kareem Hunt was first on the Chiefs, and Kareem Hunt was freaking awesome back then in an Andy Reid offense. So Kenneth Walker's going off the board at pick 13 right now. That's really, you're expecting very good things from him. He's the best running back on a very good offense, and you're really just hoping he stays healthy, which in fairness, he mostly hasn't stayed very healthy, but when healthy, he's an awesome player and he can catch.
I think Emmett Johnson, who you mentioned earlier, rookie out of Nebraska,
Yep.
He's from the Twin Cities. He might be a sneaky backup running back that you can get really late that might end up producing for you. Because as you mentioned, Kenneth Walker has injury history. It's a great spot to land in, and Emmett can catch the ball too, which is very good in that offense.
Yeah, I like it. Last pick, right? So if you take Kenneth Walker in the beginning of the second round, and then last pick of your draft, Emmett Johnson.
I mean, the head coach compared him to LaShawn McCoy earlier this offseason, so I'll take LaShawn McCoy last spot in my fantasy draft.
We would take that, but I think that might be a little hyperbole.
Yeah. John from Fargo says, I have Josh Jacobs on my dynasty team. Should I cut, trade, or drop him? And then I had another question said, one of these is a keeper, Josh Jacobs or Breece Hall, but Josh Jacobs specifically.
Well, so Jacobs has got all kinds of legal problems that could very well be coming his direction, and this is not trivial. There are people that feel like he could miss big chunks of the season, and that could end up happening here. Now, the upside is he's by far the best running back on his team, and there's if he ends up playing the full season, you're going to get him as an absolute steal. In terms of if you've already got him, he's on your dynasty roster, don't sell low. He's a good player. Do not sell low on Josh Jacobs. We hate selling low. There's nobody else on that roster. There's Chris Brooks and Marshawn Lloyd. So I don't have Josh Jacobs on any of my dynasty leagues. If I did, I would not be moving him because these are not the times when you want to try to get value for somebody when they're all messed up like this. So yeah, I say hold tight. Hope it's a traditionally slow legal system, which is often been the case with the NFL, where these things drag on and they don't end up making any real moves for a long time. So I would hold tight right there. If you're wondering where Josh Jacobs is going in fantasy drafts, that would be pick 35 as running back 16.
This is a very interesting question coming up here, Charch, that maybe you've not thought of, but I actually agree to this to a certain extent. So I'm curious what you think of this. It says, question for Paul. I've been playing fantasy football for over 30 years now, well before the internet. When all we had was Street and Smith's football preview to draft from, Bar League at the Sherwood Lounge in St. Paul. Anyway, I've lost my excitement for fantasy football, and a big part of that is how easy it is for low IQ football fans to have success. Any pointers, suggestions for an old fantasy football guy, 53 years old now, to get that excitement back?
Well, that's somebody who's a little bitter right there. Holy cow. He's basically saying, I'm the smartest guy in my league, but I don't win. So therefore, the rest of these morons are winning. So apparently it's all too easy now.
Well, I understand his point to a certain extent. I think a lot in redraft leagues these days, right? Like your person that could put no studying into fantasy football can show up on a draft day, and you're on, an app of your choosing that shows rankings, and you can just hit the next player off and you still win your fantasy football league, right? Like I understand that, which is to why I have kind of migrated over to dynasty leagues, because I do feel like that's a little bit more of a thinking man's form of fantasy football now, where you're trying to plan ahead in the future and you're studying rookies and where to draft and you're making trades. I have found myself not as invested into redraft leagues as I once was.
Okay. Well, you can absolutely spend $50, go to, footballguys.com and just work off their rankings. And you've got at your disposal the efforts of a 12-person content staff that does nothing but grind up data and, figure players out. They're really, really smart. And, you don't have to work as hard as you used to, for sure. But, that's just, what you have to do now is you just have to just be like the margin for error has gone down, because nobody's tanking drafts like they used to and making really dumb picks, because there's just too much good information out there. Even just your draft room, which has the players sorted, that sorted draft room is way better than it used to be. So it's really hard to screw it up. You used to be able to bank on like 3 people just mailing in their draft and just being a non-factor all year. And a lot of those days are over, for better or worse. And so you have to be a little bit better, and you have to challenge yourself to be a little bit better. The other thing you could do is you could go play a new kind of fantasy football, like the kind where you start with 18 teams, and then at the end of each week, the worst team gets cut, and then everybody bids on that person's players. That's really fun and totally different, and there's no playbook for that yet. So if you want to get ahead of the curve, that might be a way to do it.
Aaron from Mendota Heights says, Charch, I'm a good snake drafter, but as Max would say, I am buns at auction drafts. Give me the best strategy. We usually have $200 to work with.
All right. Particularly for somebody that has struggled with auctions, just show restraint. Don't spend all your money. Well, first, okay, wait. Number one, go get your guys. See, that's the beauty of the auction is, if there are players that are just going to make you happy to have those players, then go get them, even if they're really expensive. But when in doubt, just wait, because everybody pours their money in early. Everybody's throwing out great players. The first players that are going to come out of people's mouths are Jonathan Taylor and Ashton Genty and James Cook and Christian McCaffrey and Jamar Chase and Bijan Robinson. And just all that money's going to get drained. When in doubt, if you can have the most money at the halfway point of the draft, there's so many good players left, and you're paying 70 cents on the dollar for those players. Then later you're paying 60 cents on the dollar and 50 cents on the dollar. So when in doubt in an auction, just hold your money and wait for good players who are going to come up in the middle parts of the auction, and just everybody else is tapped out of funds. And if you've got more, you get to pay a lot less for those players.
Hunter from Bloomington says, what are your thoughts on leagues that do payouts to the top 2 scoring teams for the last third of the fantasy regular season? This helps teams in my league keep fighting fairly and using the free agency competitively instead of sort of folding and not truly going for free agents.
Okay, that's not a bad plan, but the better way to approach this is this. Use the last spot of your playoffs. So if your league gets in 6 teams, top 5 are the traditional way you do it by win-loss record, a winning percentage. That last spot is for the highest scoring team. That team gets in the playoffs by being the highest scoring remaining team regardless of record. So even if this team only has 5 wins, but they've got the next most points, they get in the playoffs. And we've used that motivation for years, and it's a great one. And that way, if you've got a really high scoring team, but you happen to have run into a bunch of other really high scoring teams, it's just worked out that way, and you've taken a bunch of L's you shouldn't have taken. This is a way to get into the playoffs, and that's your chance to go get the money. So instead of just giving the money to those teams, make them go earn it in the playoffs by awarding that last playoff spot to that team and let them go battle for money in the playoffs.
All right, another text. It says, how concerned are you with Malik Neighbors' injury?
Well,
if you remember a year ago, Charch, I had declared on with you that Malik Neighbors would be a league winner, and the injury did not age well. But how are you feeling about his injury? Because it sounds like maybe the start of the season might be at risk here.
It all sounds really positive for Neighbors. Right now he was a partial contributor towards mini camps. They say he's at about the 80% mark. So it looks like, we're trending towards the beginning of part of the season. I think the worry is week 1, even if he's on the field, is Malik Neighbors running all the plays, some of the plays, or only a few of the plays? And when can he go back to being, the player that he was? The other receivers on this team are not great. Darius Slayton, Darnell Mooney, Calvin Austin. There's Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham's back in the league. He's playing for the Giants again. I mean, Neighbors it's just the opportunity is great, but you're probably going to have to wait until he suffered his injury in late October last year. That 1 year mark, things are usually really starting to come together. It might not be till October before you feel really confident about putting him in your lineup, but that you have to decide. I don't like slow start players. I like fast start players. I want to start my first month. I want to go 3-1. I want to have negotiating options. I want to be able to trade players who are at a high value. I hate starting slow, and maybe I'm just impatient, but that's what you have to do. Neighbors going off the board, by the way, wide receiver 14, pick 32. That's a lot for a guy coming off ACL. That's, you have to pay. You're paying a premium for him.
Another text says, I am a contending manager in a dynasty league. What should I do with Breece Hall? Look to move off him and upgrade at running back, or hold him?
I'd hold. I mean, I don't think you can get a ton for him. Going off the board, pick 29 right now, by the way, running back 14. I would just hold. The Jets offense isn't going to be great, but he's a really good running back, and that offense will largely go through Breece Hall. And, they're motivated to keep him happy. He'll be a free agent after this year, and hopefully it'll work out in such a way that he has a good season. He wants to stay in New York. They solved that quarterback position. This guy's in a dynasty league. Hopefully it'll be better than Geno Smith next year at quarterback, and he's still with the team. And, maybe you hold some on a young, good running back, and he's better in future years, and it'll be okay this year too.
Next text, Charch. I know you mentioned these two names earlier. What do you think about the year 2 potential of Judkins and Egbuka?
Well, so Judkins, as we mentioned earlier, I thought he ran the ball really, really well. Doesn't catch much, but they could use him a little more that way. Your problem is just there's not a ton of talent on that whole offense. They totally rebuilt the offensive line in Cleveland. It's going to take a while for it to come back together again and really start to gel, but it's not a terrible line. It's actually, in time, should be better this year than last year. And at the end of the day, they don't want that quarterback. Whoever wins the quarterback job, they don't want that guy passing much. So it's going to be a lot of Judkins. And there's a real scenario where Judkins runs the ball more than any player in the league and ends up leading the league in carries. That is a possibility for sure. And then who was the other player that you mentioned?
Judkins and Egbuka.
So Egbuka walks into a spot now with Mike Evans gone. It's year 2 for him. He flashed moments of awesomeness last year, but it was mostly earlier in the season. And the second half season kind of disappeared. There were guys like Tez Johnson that were making more plays. Chris Godwin, shockingly, dragging that leg around. He still ended up being a bigger part of the offense. The presumption is that Egbuka, with his first round equity from last year, is going to walk out now and become the Mike Evans in this offense. Not stylistically, because Evans is a freaking beast and he's gigantic, and that's not Egbuka's game, but that offense will largely go through Egbuka. So, most of the fantasy world is already on him, and they're expecting the breakout season. And frankly, I think he's gonna be very good. And if I were gonna pick any one player from the Bucs offense, including my beloved Bucky Irving, it would be Egbuka, because I just feel like the upside is really strong, and I don't love McMillan or Godwin or Tez Johnson. I think those guys are going to fall into line behind him.
Charch, as always, could have had enough texts and talkbacks that I could have talked to you for another hour, but we'll save that for another time. I do know Common's taking a bunch of time off in August, so I might
okay.
might text you again once we get into mid-August.
Is that going to be State Fair time?
That'll be right before the State Fair, but yeah, it'll be Vikings training camp. Will be in the middle of all that stuff. So,
no doubt.
Maybe I'll give you a ring back.
We will. Yeah, let's do this again.
All right, thanks, Charch. Appreciate it.
Thanks, my man.
All right, Paul Charch, fantasy football godfather. Max, thank you so much for your help. I always love working with you.
Love working with you, Tenebisi.
You're the best. Common Man will be back tomorrow. Mark Rosen back at 2:00 as well. Thank you for listening. It's been a good day.
Listen back to any of Common Man's programs by podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or KFAN.com.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
This report is sponsored by Gens Ryan Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, and Electrical.
Traffic's heavy southbound 35E.